Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents How to Be a Badass Vigilante by Michael Anderle, narrated by Dara Rosenberg. Chapter 1. A man sat in an old metal chair whose feet screeched like nails across a chalkboard if he tried to move. Not that he had a chance in hell of standing up, since his hands were zip-tied together at the wrists behind the backplate, and his ankles were lashed to the chair's legs. He was a big, beefy man, pale, and his blue eyes alternated between widening in fear and drooping shut in pain and exhaustion. The chair rested in the center of a dim, featureless room, its floor, walls, and ceiling bare, damp concrete. A single naked light bulb hung overhead, casting the prisoner in a wan cone of yellow light. Against the walls, standing or leaning, were 8 or 9 men and women, dark silhouettes amidst the gloom beyond the light's weak radius. All but one were watching the man in the chair. The lone exception was a woman who stood 3 paces in front of the captive. She leaned forward to speak to him and hear his responses. The woman wore a long skirt and a formal jacket, the color of which was difficult to identify since it seemed to change whenever the light shifted. Her hair was raven black, and her skin was even paler than the man's, to the point where it practically glowed under the illumination. She raised a finger in front of the man's face, then moved it from side to side while checking to make sure his eyes followed it. She concluded he was conscious and paying attention. "Tell us about the LA witches," she demanded. Her Russian carried a slight accent, perhaps Baltic, Polish, or Ukrainian. Though she spoke softly, there was an icy firmness to her words. The man, his name was Sven, moaned when he tried to speak. His eyes took a moment to focus on her, and when they did, his voice came out in a gurgling rasp. "I told you before, I'm not one of them. I know nothing about them, beyond what everyone heard from rumors and the media." Though weak, there was an undercurrent of panic desperation in his demeanor. "We know," the woman affirmed. "We are aware that you are not a member, Sven. But we also know you have seen them. Do not make things worse for yourself by trying to lie to us. You have experienced only a fraction of what we can do to you." Sven squirmed in place, but without much force. He felt as though he were trapped in a nightmare, the awful content of which was only half provided by what was happening to him at the moment. The other half lay in the recent past. The other night, a group of dark figures had attacked the empty storefront and converted warehouse where his gang had their headquarters. The interlopers had been insubstantial and had seemed immune to pain and damage. Sven was certain he and Johnny Torres had hit them with at least a couple of the numerous bullets they'd fired. But there had been no effect. Then something had come over them. A wave of psychic confusion and exhaustion summoned by what could only have been a massive and obscure power. He and Johnny had laid barely conscious in the grass while the mysterious vigilante known to the greater Los Angeles area as Motorcycle Man invaded their safe house, battered through their defenses, and finally killed Pauline, their leader. Sven couldn't say he missed her much. Pauline had been planning to blow up a cocktail bar that had offended her. He personally felt her ruthlessness and stupidity was likely what had brought the Dark Avenger's wrath down on all of them. And then they had been left with a vision. Motorcycle Man had revealed herself to be a woman, one with glowing eyes and a booming voice, who claimed she would remember them and come after them unless they changed their ways once and for all. That had been his plan. Get the hell out. Sven had parted from Johnny and Leah, intending to drift northeast into the upper Midwest, Canada or Europe, and turn over a new leaf. He would work on a farm or something similarly innocuous and never speak to anyone in the criminal underworld again. Then these people had caught up with him. The ivory-skinned woman leaned closer, and Sven's mind returned to the present as her fingers, which glowed at the tips, reached toward him. He screamed and his body tensed, then convulsed as his voice rose and wavered. The ragged cry of anguish echoed off the thick walls. No one outside the basement would hear him. The woman retracted her hand, and the pain vanished. "Tell us what you remember. You saw something, we know." "It is pointless to pretend otherwise." Gasping, Sven shook his head. Nothing. A dark figure, that is all. They knocked me out and was gone when I woke up. The rumors on the street were all I ever knew." His interrogator smiled. "We are getting somewhere, but not far enough." Sven laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was a dry, sardonic chuckle. "I know how the Organization works. You will kill me when you have no more use for me." The pale woman stood up straight. "We are not the Mafia, Sven." Her smile didn't provide him any comfort. "We are the Orthodoxy." She turned her head, snapped her fingers, and strode into the shadows. A moment later, another woman advanced. She was an inch or two shorter than the first, with skin that, while light, was closer to normal, and her hair was wavy and a light brown. She looked pleasant and average in every way. "Hello, Sven," she began. "I am Pavla. Please forgive us if Agnieszka went too far with you. I tried to reason with her to tell her that it is better to ask nicely and treat people well." Her mouth pouted. "We will not kill you. All you need to do is tell us everything you remember. Even the smallest details might be of help to us, and besides, it will allow us to harm the people who killed your boss and sent you fleeing. In this, we will all benefit." Sven was having trouble thinking. His brain buzzed with fear or swam in and out of delusions and random intrusive ideas, and he needed water and sleep. He could not be sure if the two women were using the old good cop, bad cop routine on him, or if Pavla was sincere. She put a hand on his shoulder, and his aches were soothed while she reassured him that everything would be all right, and that they wanted to help him as much as they wanted him to help them. Finally, he broke down and told her what he knew, which wasn't much more than what he'd already said. "Motorcycle Man, the leader of the LA Witches," he muttered, "is a woman. I could not get a good look at her since she wore a helmet at first, and then she used an illusion that she seemed to put right in our heads from far away. I believe her to be faster and stronger than human. She killed Pauline because of—" He went on to describe his late boss's plot to blow up the Mermaid, the bar and grill in Los Angeles' Little Tokyo their gang had been trying to leverage as a front. When he was done, Pavla gave him a warm smile and a friendly nod. "Thank you, Sven. We will give you a glass of water and then let you sleep." She turned and left him alone in the circle of light, taking her place beside Agnieszka at the darkened fringe of the chamber. "We should fix him up," Pavla suggested in a low voice. "He may be useful to us in the future." Agnieszka tapped a long finger on her chin and straightened her jet-black hair. "I will think about it. Allow him to recover overnight, and we will make our final decision tomorrow. For now, Pavla, it seems that you will be going to the United States." The other woman bowed lightly. She had expected as much. It was her duty. Agnieszka went on. "This witch may be one of the greatest talents we have encountered in many years, and she may have friends with lesser talents of their own. That creates a great branching tree of many possibilities. You are the best at tracking. I can rely on you to find this woman and to cut off those branches which might reach out to harm us, or bring back seeds that we may plant ourselves if the possibilities are advantageous." "Yes, Agnieszka." Pavla bowed again. "I understand." Once more, her job would be to assess the situation and determine if the renegade witch could be convinced to join the Orthodoxy. If not, then there was no need for the LA Witches to continue existing in any capacity whatsoever. Pavla walked past the other men and women of the coven, almost all of whom, like herself and their leader, hailed from Eastern Europe. There were a stray few from other places, but for many years they had been a parallel order to the visible and existing one, the shadow counterpoint to the Orthodox Church. Pavla left the room for questioning and strode down the bare stone hallway toward the stairs. She had never been to Los Angeles. This trip ought to be invigorating. James Lovecraft and Mother LeBlanc sat across from one another in the living area of their hotel room, sipping coffee and thinking. Off to the side, the television screen hummed and chattered with irrelevant news reports, indecisive weather bulletins, and obnoxious commercials. Or was it obnoxious weather bulletins and indecisive commercials? With the many caveats the pharmaceutical companies added at the end, you had to figure it had a 50-50 chance of healing you or killing you. Mother LeBlanc did little except drink and vacantly watch TV, though her thoughts were deep and expansive. She was a pleasant-looking black woman who appeared to be only 25 or so, though in truth she was far older. She wore a billowing dress of many different colors that shifted in a non-existent breeze. Lovecraft, on the other hand, was devoting about half his time and mental energy to browsing something on his laptop. He looked to be in his mid-30s and was a fairly average white man with glasses, dressed in dapper but unobtrusive clothes. LeBlanc finally focused and glanced at him. "Well, James, I suppose we ought to be getting back to New York to speak to the council. I am not greatly enthusiastic. I know you aren't, but it is our duty. Then again, I would not object to taking a slight detour or two to investigate further leads." She spoke with a faint but definite New Orleans accent, and her diction was oddly formal and old-fashioned. Yes," James replied, his eyes fixed on the computer screen in front of him. He raised the coffee cup to his lips. "Slight detours. Sure." He took a sip, then waved the cup at the ceiling. "Mars isn't that far away, is it? A couple 100 million miles, I think." He looked to the left, waving the coffee cup once more in that general direction. "That way, I think." As a child, he had thought about becoming an astronaut. Instead, he'd ended up in advertising, and he was good at it. So good that when he finally convinced the High Council of Thaumaturgy to allow him to publish a book that divulged the basics of their craft to the general public, they had been successful. Perhaps too successful. Thaumaturgy was dying out. The council was short a few members, and no one had any apprentices. The idea behind publishing How to Be a Badass Witch was to tease out those members of the population who had a magical aptitude and assess their suitability for recruitment. Unfortunately, far more people had the talent than they had expected, but none had proven suitable. James and LeBlanc had withdrawn the book from circulation and removed the powers from the rogue miracle workers who had cropped up around the country. It had become a living nightmare, trying to stamp out little forest fires of potential mischief across the United States. Now it was time to go home and face the music. Lady Mitchell, who tended to take charge of the council whenever she thought she could get away with it, would have James and LeBlanc pilloried for all the trouble they had caused her. "Mars," LeBlanc mused. "Were there humans there? I suppose some might show magical talent, but I'm afraid we're a few decades early for that. I remember when reaching the moon was an astounding achievement." She reached into her dress, produced a pitcher of sugar and a silver spoon from somewhere within it, and sweetened her coffee before returning the vessel and utensil to the confines of her sleeve. Her dress always contained whatever she needed or wanted. James's eyes widened, and he sat upright in his chair and pointed at his laptop screen. "Got one. Look at this. An international lead. The book must have sold a handful of copies overseas, Switzerland in this case." "Switzerland?" LeBlanc set down her cup. "Fascinating. Go on." Her partner grinned and rubbed his hands together. "Oh, yes, this is rich. The guy, Owen Dartmoor, is an English expat working for the Red Cross in Geneva. Someone interviewed him about his weird interest in the occult, as they call it, and the claims of some people he's helped that he possesses abnormal healing abilities. He seems to have brushed it off, saying that people are being silly and he's only following normal medical procedures." LeBlanc raised an eyebrow, then stroked her chin with a slim, dark hand. Well, if indeed he has the gift, it is an encouraging sign. The man already wishes to do good things, and he doesn't have a problem with doing them as part of an organization with rules and standards and a command hierarchy. That, in truth, was the biggest problem the two elder thaumaturges had encountered when checking out the various prospects throughout the U.S. Too many stubbornly independent types. It was like the nation encouraged the notion and placed some serum in the water system, like fluoride. Few wanted to work with others and share the effort. Perhaps because it required them to share the glory. And, James pointed out, he hasn't done anything crazy yet. No self-aggrandizement, no blowing up at people, no weird vigilante campaigns. He paused, then peered into his partner's eyes. "Wanna hop over to Geneva?" A rare mischievous smile found its way onto LeBlanc's serene face. "Why, yes, I believe I do. Clearly this is an urgent matter that requires immediate investigation. I am sure the council will understand." James chuckled. "Positive. In a way, it will make Mitchell's life easier. She won't have to waste time scolding us and can get back to reading bedtime stories to her mutant begonias or whatever the hell she's working on lately." He reflected that not so long ago, he and LeBlanc had disagreed about how to handle the situation, particularly in Los Angeles. He had wanted to give the so-called motorcycle man a shot, whereas she had wanted to shut him down immediately. LeBlanc had been prepared to throw James under the bus to save face with the rest of the council. After all, publishing the book had been his idea first and foremost. But after their long cross-country trip together, and the various bizarre stuff they had been through, including foiling a high-profile bank robbery and temporarily working with the FBI, "So," LeBlanc concluded, "yes, we'll do it. Of course. We will need to find the most expeditious way across the Atlantic." James's eyes opened as the implications became clear. He stood up, then walked over to the window and looked down at his Rolls-Royce Phantom. It was his favorite car, and he had insisted on using it for the trip across the country from New York. He turned back to his partner. "The easiest way to get the car to Europe would be to bring it on deck on a ship, of course. A cruise ship would be nice, but I'm sure we can, convince a cargo ship to let us aboard, too. They might have more room anyway. Then, once we land, we'll have our transportation all set to go. Europe is smaller than America, so it won't take that long to get from the coast of France or Spain to—" LeBlanc cut him off. "James, don't be ridiculous. We are not taking your car on a ship. Airplanes were invented over a century ago, and rental cars are readily available. Besides, the quicker we can get out of the States, the better." James pouted. His eyes beseeched her. "Other cars don't drive the same, and we won't be traveling in anywhere near the same level of style." He shook his head at the prospect of having to downgrade to something merely charming, like an old Citroen or, worse yet, some awful utilitarian Japanese car. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out of his pocket and glanced at the screen. LeBlanc inquired, "Speak of the devil?" "Correct. It's Lady Mitchell," James replied. He didn't answer. It took a minute and a half before the call relented and went to voicemail. Mitchell informed him that the council had requested another video meeting immediately to discuss what the holdup was. They were expecting the two of them back in upstate New York post-haste. James slipped the phone back into his pants. "You know something, LeBlanc? You're right. Let's take the fastest route out of the States. I'll start looking for plane tickets. I'm sure there's a flight departing Los Angeles tonight or tomorrow morning that goes straight to Geneva, or at least to Zurich or Bern." She smiled and sipped her coffee. "Excellent. Let me know if you need any help. I haven't been on a plane since the 1970s. I imagine things have improved since then." "Not necessarily," James admitted. He sat down at his laptop and pulled up the first travel site that came to mind. Chapter 2. Kera had figured that if she was going to drop an atomic bomb on the head of the man she wanted to love, she might as well at least do it over a big, fat, mouth-watering tableful of Chinese takeout. The warehouse in downtown L.A. she had converted into an apartment was filled with appetizing aromas coming from the various greasy cartons. Unfortunately, Christian did not have anywhere near the appetite she did. He had finished his share of the food when Kera was only half done with hers. In fairness, it had been a double order, so the timetable had needed to be advanced. She went ahead and told him, between bites of her food, of course. Chris stared at her, his eyes slowly bugging out of their sockets. For a moment, it looked like he was about to spit his last mouthful of fried rice across the table. Kera frowned and leaned to the side. Oh, crap. Not only did I fuck up the delivery, but now I'm going to have to clean up the whole kitchen. But Chris's cheeks puffed out and he managed to swallow, the lump visibly moving down his throat. Hang on. His jaw fell open as he sputtered. Hang on for one damn second here. You're a what? Kera sighed. Her eyes half-lidded and her mouth glum, she repeated herself. I am a witch. Or thaumaturge is the proper official term. She glanced up, thinking about what she had read in her book before she looked back. I think, but close enough. And I wiped your memory with magic a couple times. That's why you couldn't remember what happened on our first date. Or our second. She hesitated and looked down at the table's surface. I'm sorry, Chris. I shouldn't have done that. He stared at her. Though she could not read his thoughts, she could guess most of them from the overall emotional vibe pouring off him. Her sensitivity to things like that had increased since she had began dabbling in thaumaturgy. Dabbling? Hell, she had jumped into the pond of discovery and swum a few laps in glee. He was mostly confused and hurt. Perhaps he felt betrayed. Slightly creeped out was a given, she figured. She would be. He was probably wondering if she was crazy. It would be easier for Christian to believe she was a delusional schizophrenic than in the reality of magic, especially since he would have to accept that he had been a victim of her powers. Kera wanted to cry from regret for the inherent wrongness of what she'd done, and from the fear that telling Chris the truth might have been worse than continuing the charade. What reason would he possibly have to keep her in his life after this? Chris, she said, and her voice wavered, though she willed herself not to burst into tears. I'm sorry. And I know it sounds insane, okay? But if you'll let me show you some things, if you'll please trust me to explain it all, I can prove it. And I can make it up to you. Will you listen to me at least? She had never been the sort of young woman who tried to manipulate men by playing on their sense of pity or sympathy, but this was a unique situation. She put on her best puppy dog expression. He needs to accept me on his own terms, genuinely, and on his own initiative, or not. Chris turned his eyes away from hers and absent-mindedly stabbed at a platter of chicken lo mein with a plastic fork, his face still confused. Kera took in the sight of him while he tried to decide. He wasn't the most impressive-looking of men, of average height and physique, but handsome enough. He had kind, intelligent eyes, combined with the suggestion of an inner steel she'd love to see more of. It's so weird, the way we always want to find something in a man that seems incomplete and bring it to fruition ourselves, she mused. Chris finally gave up on trying to talk himself out of it. He shrugged, and his voice held a noticeable tinge of tired exasperation. He turned to look at her. I guess I don't know what the hell to make of any of this, Kera. But I'll hear your pitch if nothing else. She closed her eyes, giving silent thanks to whatever powers might be listening. When she opened them again, she breathed in and said, Okay, thank you. I, will need to finish eating soon. I have a high metabolism, remember? But here, let me start by showing you the book. She pushed her chair back. That's where this all started. Standing up, she walked toward her nightstand, where her hard copy of How to Be a Badass Witch lay face down in the alcove shelf beneath a couple of notebooks. Chris stood and followed her. A spell book, I'm guessing. He did software development for a living, so figuring out puzzles was his thing. Yes, exactly. Sounds ridiculous, I know. She snatched the tome and laid it on the edge of her bed. And they didn't try to make it seem all ancient and respectable and mysterious. It's in the form of a self-help book or a dummy's guide to whatever. In a way, that's what sold me. No pretense. Chris stared at the cover. Man, what is it with people these days? Going around calling everything badass. The publishers did their marketing homework in any event. Ignoring the comment, Kera flipped the book open to the table of contents and found the spell of forgetting. Here, she indicated. See? The effects it describes are exactly like what you experienced both times we were alone together. Is it normal for you to have small but specific bouts of amnesia? It does sound familiar. A faint tremor of discomfort went through the young man as he read the description of the charm. And no, I can't remember having memory issues like that before. Unless you count a couple times when I got drunk. I figured that was it. Good old alcohol. He leaned back and blew out a breath. You make a valid point about how, coincidental it was that I forgot both of our dates. But, and don't take this the wrong way, how do I know you didn't just slip me a drug or something? Kera had suspected he might react like this. No choice but to gamble on a more dramatic presentation. Okay, she began. Here's another good one that gave me some trouble at first. In fact, the reason I dyed my hair black was that I burnt half of it off the first try or two. She flipped to the firefly spell. Chris watched with growing fascination as Kera read the incantations from the book, focused on a point of air near the wall across from them, and folded and twisted her fingers in the required sacred gestures. The air rippled, and a tongue of bright orange flame erupted from out of nowhere, curled upward, and then dissipated into a faint trail of smoke before it had the chance to set anything on fire. Holy shit! Chris stumbled back a step, and his arm shot forward to point at the wall as he stared at her, then at the wall again. What the hell was that? Kera shrugged. Magic. Basic fire spell. You're serious, aren't you? His face snapped toward her, his eyes wide with suspicion and amazement. Even if that was some kind of obscure trick, you believe it. She nodded. It's not a trick, Chris. It works. I can show you one or two others if you want. He did not protest, so she showed him. There was the cascade of illumination that generated a stream of sparkling colored lights, and which, unlike Firefly, was harmless to her hair and others around her. Then the enchantment that allowed her to fall slowly and softly to the ground. She demonstrated it after climbing on top of her fridge and jumping toward the center of the warehouse. The phantom sound spell. Kera asked him to come up with a set of weird noises, and he suggested lions roaring and attacking zebras. Annoyingly, she did not know what zebras sounded like, but she successfully produced lion sounds, combined with lots of clomping hooves that sounded like they were stampeding straight through her living room. Incredible. Chris's mouth opened and shut a few times. This is fucking incredible. So many people on this planet, and most of us never knew that things like this existed. I have no idea what else to say. Kera came up beside him and gave him a friendly, if slightly annoyed, nudge. Well, you can say whether or not you believe me now. He looked at her. I believe you. I mean, it's hard to believe, but clearly you're involved with something that goes beyond my understanding. So I guess you could say I'm willing to hear more? At that moment, something clicked in his mind, and he began looking at her in a curious way. A different way. Then he glanced in the opposite direction at Z, Kira's Kawasaki Z900. That's it, Kera surmised. No more beating around the bush. He would figure it out himself at this point, so I might as well drop the final bomb. She inhaled and spoke. So, yes, I am a person with extraordinary powers who also happens to ride a bike. You're smart. Go ahead and put two and two together, Chris. It's easier than most of the shit you do in information technology, isn't it? To her surprise, he burst out laughing. Holy shit. Oh man, like, right when I thought this couldn't get any more... His voice trailed off and he covered his face as he guffawed. When he finally looked at her again, he stated it clearly. Motorcycle Man was a woman all along, then? She frowned. My riding leathers do make my chest look pretty fucking flat. He laughed. Then the peels died and he stood in thoughtful silence for a moment. His pleasant face became glum. So, he commented, you erased my memory to protect yourself from being found out. Kera flushed with shame mixed with a little bit of anger. I said I was sorry. There isn't much else I can say about that. Rather than respond directly, he asked, Am I the only one who knows? She swallowed. The Kims do too, but you and they are the only ones. She decided not to mention the mysterious pair who had been tracking her since they were in an indefinite category as far as she was concerned. At least she had finished adding silver and iron implements to the exposed parts of her building. Those materials blocked magical signals and made it harder for other thaumaturges to sense what she was up to. Okay, said Chris. Did you erase their memories too?
Sample complete. Ready to continue?